Welcome to Inflection Point Podcast, where we cultivate change from the inside out as we ponder the Cairo question. Will Cairo have to protest in his lifetime for the birthright to freely and peacefully exist in the skin in which he was born? We stand on the belief that dismantling racism goes beyond laws and legislation or politics and economics. Here, anti-racism activation is presented as an inside job where personal transformation and accountability impact social change. So take a seat at the anti-racism activation table with Inflection Point Podcast.
So thank you for tuning into the latest episode of Inflection Point Podcast, where we are dedicated to anti-racism activation and the art of listening in authentic conversation, engagement, action, and of course, accountability. I am your host, Anita Russell, and here's a quick hello from co-host Mavis Bauman and Gail Hunter.
Hi, I'm Mavis Bauman. Thanks for joining us in our last episode of the year.
Yes, hi, I'm Gail Hunter, and thanks for being here.
Wonderful. So yes, this is our last episode for the year. And if you've been following us, you know that we've had this year-long theme around community engagement and the grassroots of change. So we've been having case studies and exploring stories and having guests come on to really drive home that whole concept of community engagement and the grassroots of change. So this is our last episode for 2025, and our plan is to recap the year with our most inspiring episodes and also highlighting the guests that we've had. We have had some incredible guests going all the way back to the beginning of the year. And I'm going to just go through a quick rundown of some of those guests just to kind of refresh our memories. And then we're going to go into a discussion of what are those most inspiring episodes that we have had. And between the three of us, we have had some incredible conversations. We've had incredible inspiration by our guests. And right now, what I'm going to do is just very quickly go through our list of guests that we've had this year. The reason I wanted to do this is because I just wanted to honor them for the messages, the inspiration, the excitement that they bring as a result of the work that they actually do in that community engagement space. So I'm going to start with our first guest. Her name is Shade McDaniel, and she is a senior vice president of programs and strategic initiatives at the All Stars Project and the Operation Conversation Cops and Kids. One of the reasons this was so exciting for me is because I got to actually experience the All Stars Project and the Operation Conversation Cops and Kids firsthand. And so having the opportunity for her to come on was really such a gift, and I really appreciate that. So that was our first guest. Then we had a gentleman by the name of Kevin Reese, and he founded this program called Until We Are All Free. And a wonderful thing about him is that when you look at his life, he actually spent 14 years in prison. And so if you kind of imagine what that might look like, that's not what you imagine it looked like is not what it actually looked like for Kevin. He actually founded something called The Bridge, which was a grassroots group of directly impacting criminal justice experts who came together and in the prison had this writing program. So listening to his story was just fabulous. Then we had a young lady by the name of Denise Jones, who represented the Youth Empowerment Services Program here in the city of Pittsburgh. She's an educational consultant. One of the great things about that is that I also had the opportunity to experience the YES program, I think it was back in 2020 or so. And I did their summer program, which was very, it was just wonderful for me. So we have Denise, and then we have two of my favorites, because, and I say that because they are representative of Ujamaa Collective, and I am a member of the Ujamaa Collective, which is this very unique cultural enriching experience. So we had Lakeisha Wolf, who is the executive director of Ujamaa, and we also had Elena Griffith, who is one of the ambassadors. Then that followed, we followed that conversation up with a very dear friend of mine. Her name is Leontine Oswegu, and we were having a conversation about economic sovereignty in Burkina Faso. And my friend Leontine, that happens to be her home country. So we got a really personal look into all of the events that are happening in her home country. Then we had two episodes where we had Ed Bradley on, and he talked to us quite a bit about mental health, the NAEP, education reform, and how all of these things come together. And they don't necessarily present education in the best light. And so that was a very in-depth conversation. And then finally, our last guest of the year was Sally Ann Clues. And she is the executive director of an organization called Shift Works Community and Public Works. And their whole entire emphasis is on this idea of bringing the community and public works together. So the work is designed to expand the range of possibilities for artists to engage communities. So I know that was a mouthful to say, but I just wanted to say and call out every last one of their names because they each brought something really dynamic into our space. And I am just grateful for them even willingly coming on and sharing their experiences with us. So what I'd like to do now is, because I know that was a lot of talking from me, so now I would like to shift the conversation over to Mavis and Gail, and I'm going to start with Mavis. And what I'd like us to do now is share with our audience personally what were some of those most inspiring episodes, those most inspiring moments. One of the things for me that's really great is a lot of the guests or individuals that I had the opportunity to work with, or I met them along the way, or somebody introduced me. And in a lot of ways, that's how we find our guests. So I want to shift the conversation now over to Mavis. And I want you, Mavis, to talk to us about your most inspiring episodes, those episodes that really, really impacted you.
Thanks, Anita. First, I would like to add my thanks to our guests. They have just been lovely and generous and open with us. And I keep saying that being a part of this podcast is like taking a college course. I have been learning so much from the guests, from our subject matter, from my co-hosts. It's just been a wonderful experience. So there's been inspiration all the year for me. But I wanted to call out our episode about Robert Livingston and his new book, which is Play the Game, Change the Game, or Leave the Game. A year or so ago, we did a piece about him on his original book called The Conversation. And I had to kind of refresh my memory on it, but it was actually a Financial Times best book of the year. And that book was about giving people tools to use within their organizations to talk about race. And we were also excited, along with him, about what was happening after the murder of George Floyd, and how interested people had become in Black Lives Matter, in developing DEI programs within organizations. So lo and behold, then happened 2025. And DEI has, for lack of a more kind way to say it, been kicked to the curb. And it's broken a lot of hearts because it was an important effort to bring all kinds of people into a more equitable playing field. So Dr. Livingston was faced with this issue, and he was giving a speech about how white people were stepping away, allies were even stepping away from DEI. And so his next book, as I mentioned, was Play the Game, Change the Game, Leave the Game. This book, the focus of it was, instead of waiting for white people to change, Black people must prioritize their own prosperity, power, and self-determination by navigating, challenging, and fighting existing racist systems. And what inspired me about this and this book was the response of the Black community to the ending of the assault on DEI. That, you know, this has been the game really since Africans were brought to this country as slaves. Black people have had to respond to many different iterations of a white supremacist society. And I just find that response on the part of Black folks and the communities that they are able to build really inspiring. There's not, you know, I've heard this in different environments, and I hope I'm stating this correctly, that white people maybe even subconsciously fear that Black people will respond in a very negative way. You know, like the images we had of the Black Panthers, what are they going to do to us? That is not the strategy of the Black community. The strategy is, okay, let's find a different way. And so this book, Play the Game and So On by Robert Livingston, talks about, do you want to stay in the white systems and try and play that game? You can, or you can work to change it, as he did with Conversations, or you can leave, pardon me, and establish your own way of living in this supremacist society, white supremacist society. And I find that, again, really inspiring, because it is not about striking back. It is about building something new and different and in a healthy way. How can we establish our own win-win environment? And I would love to see all groups of people think about responding to what they don't like in our society this way. This doesn't have to be a war. It can be a creative response to something that is holding people back. And as I say, the whole Black community has continued to find a way to survive despite centuries of opposition and obstruction since they were brought to this country. So that episode really inspired me. You know, I chose my inspiring episodes based on things that I had no idea about and really learned from. You know, I've just seen our podcast grow over the past few years. We are really challenging our own intellectual participation in this society. And you know, this was one of those steps in that direction. The other episode that I was very inspired by was, you know, couched on the book called The Sovereign Psyche by Ezra Aharon, I believe. Mm-hmm. And this was about the idea that, I was going to use his words here because they're so pointed, that even Churchill said, this sets it up: the empires of the future are the empires of the mind. In other words, instead of butchering Africans and others through colonial subjugation, Europeans would dominate the world via superior sovereign intellect. And then he goes on to say, a central premise of this work is that, quote, there is no such thing as intellectual or institutional equality between Black and white America. A primary cause and contributor to all racial disproportions and injustices is that Black America lacks the equivalent strength of institutions. Not that they lack in equivalent strength, but their institutions and the appropriate end use of their intellect. So he's talking about thinking about how Black folks think of themselves and establishing their own sovereignty over who they are, their own sovereignty over their identity, and how they participate in the society that we all live in. And I just thought that this was something we can all do, that, to use his words again, sovereignty foremost is an energizing mindset, consciousness, and thought process by which people can define and express freedom through the unique particularities of the political and ideological self-identities. Even as a woman, I have worked to establish my own identity in, a patriarchal world. Who can I be? Who am I as an individual? What power do I have? What instruction am I willing to accept from people who are above me, either in the hierarchy of government or corporate life or church life, any kind of life? But to establish my own sovereignty is to participate in a way. And for the Black community to utilize their own intellectual forces and their own, what did they say? To establish the equivalent strength in their communities would change our society. And I think that's super inspiring and exciting that there are people out there examining these kinds of subjects and helping us to think about a different way to live together. So that's my inspiration for the year.
And I'm so glad that you selected those two, because when you look at Livingston's book, Play the Game, Change the Game, Leave the Game, there's a direct connection, if you will, to sovereign psyche. That's sort of like this fundamental flow beneath the surface of all of that is this sovereign psyche. Real simple. Sovereign psyche. I own my identity.
Yeah, I own my mind.
I own my mind. I own my gifts. I own my talents. I own the purpose for which I have been put on this planet. Nobody else gets to take that away from me and define that for me. So when I think about, some of the things that you just talked about, you mentioned the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I read an article where the person had said, oh, diversity, equity, and inclusion is dead. No, it's not, because I'm still here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not dead. I'm still here. Not only me as a person who believes and thrives in that kind of outlook on life, but so many millions of other people. I see them every day when they're writing and all of that. DEI is not dead because I'm still here.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm still here. And Gail is
you're
here.
still exactly.
All of our participation,
Exactly.
as different as we are, is still here. And I'm seeing some different words being applied to those kinds of programs. And it's interesting. It's not gone, because it's the right thing to do. To provide an equitable environment for people.
Absolutely. So your comments, Gail, on what Mavis just said?
It's like one of the things I think in my work, my professional work, I've always taught people is don't give anyone the power over you to determine the I am of who you are. Just be that I am, just be that person. That is your right, your basic human right, your choice. And you don't have to choose to give anybody that power over you. And whatever color skin you have, but don't let anybody do that to you. And so it's exactly what you were saying, Mavis, is empower yourself, right? And own who you are and be who you are. and don't give that power to anybody else.
Mhm. And
Because
it's really exciting.
That is sovereignty.
Yeah, it's really exciting when I, think about my friend Leontine. I've known Leontine for years,
Yeah.
right? And to see the joy and the pride that she had when I had the conversation with her about coming on and talking about the work that Ibrahim Traore is doing in her home country.
Right.
That was just really, really gratifying to me. Number one, because she's my friend and a very dear friend of mine. But number two, I've been reading all of this stuff about this leader and, some of the previous leaders of the country and the strength that's there. I feel like that's what we're all craving for
Yeah.
on
And
some level.
they're breaking from the colonialist mindset.
Exactly.
Openly, peacefully, and with a lot of strength. And it's
Absolutely.
exciting to see. Yeah.
Absolutely. It definitely is. So, Gail, Mavis, rather, did you have anything else that you wanted to weave in before I switch the conversation over to Gail?
Not at the moment. I suspect some things will come up as we talk about other inspiring points, but not for the moment.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So, Miss Gail,
Mhm.
let's talk about your most inspiring episodes. What were they? What was it that inspired you, and why was it inspiring?
Well, I'm going to start with the one is from Robert Livingston, and as Mavis probably says, he's a social psychologist at Harvard, and he talks about racism as an addiction. And because I'm in this field, I've worked with, and there are many types of addiction. It's not just drug and alcohol, but there are many forms of addictive behavior, and not just even gambling. Those are the top ones. But you can be addicted to anything, to food, to exercise, to even things that could appear healthy, but they're not. But it's the patterns of addiction that I think he points out that in looking at this, I think I was just fascinated by that comparison, and it makes sense to me. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So an addiction to power, he looks at racism as an addiction to power, to privilege, to the comforts of white supremacy, an addiction that denies harm, resists change, and survives through denial. I'm not racist. I don't see color. All the things that as a white person I may have said and others may say. And yet it is ingrained in each of us with white skin, generationally, historically, even if you consciously are not choosing to think that way, you certainly have a history there, that has directed you and people before you that we can't deny, right? And so the goal for people that are white, this is a white person's problem. The goal for people that are white is to not be addicted. It's like the only person that can change an addict is the addict, right? You can want that addict to change,
Yes.
but they're not going to change until they choose to step into recovery. And that means they have to get that honest and clear within themselves and look in that mirror and say, is this really what I want to choose and how I want to choose to be and live in this life? Well, racism is the same thing. It's like, do I want to be this person? Do I want to attach the beliefs of white supremacy, which is rampant? I mean, we're talking about it and hearing about it, and the veil has been lifted, and so many people say, let's go back to make America great again. Well, going back to the 50s era, the 40s and 50s is not exactly where I would want to be, right? As a female, as a woman, certainly not as a person of color. I mean, that was not the greatest time. Maybe if you're a white male, it was, but it wasn't if you were anybody other than that. And right now, white men are actually in the minority in this country, which may increase that fear and that need to continue to attach to that addiction, right? So if that means Black people in communities, what does that mean? Well, they don't have to wait for somebody else to recover, right? They have to step into their own power, which is what you've been talking about, and walk away from that game, as Dr. Livingston states, either change the game, play the game, change the game, or leave the game. They have to leave the game and claim their own birthright of equity. And so this episode was really about truth telling, about healing, about building futures that are not bound by addiction, but shaped by freedom instead. And I really liked how he looked at addiction. He looked at racism as addiction with the same issues that you would look at any person that's addicted to something. That the power of white supremacy is like that addiction of the mind and body. It promises comfort and denies harm. It escalates over time. It resists withdrawal. Yet true freedom requires a courageous break and deep healing. So the comfort and dependency part of the white supremacy is like a drug. It offers that comfort, that status, that security to anybody who would benefit from that. The dependence is the systems of privilege act like a drug, right? Providing that comfort and advantage and security of some while creating harm for others. And I have to think about again, the common alcoholic or the drug addict. Escalation over time, the systems of racism normalize harm and require ever more rationalizations to sustain it. And that we've seen that all over the place, right? The compulsion aspect of it is racism can function as a compulsive pattern. It's rooted in the habits, the biases, and the social conditioning that people may not even recognize, as I mentioned before. They may not even have that conscious awareness of it, but it's there. It's there. And the compulsion is about the root in the habits and the biases and the conditioning that people, as I said, may not even recognize. The denial part that he talks about was a central feature of both addiction and racism. It's what I mentioned before that, I don't have a problem. I'm not racist, right? I don't see color. I'm not racist at all. Yet you may not consciously think you are, but there may be some subconscious issues going on that have to have come from generations prior to you. And withdrawal. So when equity or justice is pursued, those who benefit from privilege often experience withdrawal symptoms, fear, resentment. Think about how much anger is out there now. Or claims of reverse racism, DEI. How many people are saying, well, what it did was it eliminated men that were white from being able to get jobs. That is not what DEI was ever intended for, right? But how that switched and the words were turned around, right? Withdrawal and the efforts to dismantle it are often met with backlash, fear, resentment, and discomfort, just like withdrawal from symptoms of addiction. So this recovery is a choice. And no one can force an addict into sobriety, and no one can force white people or institutions into racism. They have to choose it individually. The work has to come from within each of us. And for Black people, don't play the game. Right? You can't change the game. You can't change the addict, right? But you can empower yourself.
And when I think about, when I connect everything that you just said, and I think about Dr. Livingston, the first book around the conversation and everything, I think it's so beautiful how it really does dovetail together.
Yeah,
right?
it does.
And so when I first saw the book, and I'm going to be quick because we only have like another minute before we have to go to the break. But when I first saw the book, I saw the preview, right? I didn't actually see the book because I was reading information about it. And so I started analyzing myself, like, because I spent almost 23, 24 years in corporate America. And so it made me kind of sit back and think about, what did I look like in terms of playing the game? Because to a certain extent, if you're in corporate America, you have to learn to a certain extent to be able to play the game. But I drew the line when playing the game means that I have to compromise my own values or compromise myself. And so, I could remember thinking, like, when I come into this space, there are certain parts of myself that I leave at the door. And then when I leave the office, I pick those things back up and put them on me. I literally made a conscious decision one day that I'm not doing that anymore. I'm coming to work and I'm being 100% Anita.
Sovereignty.
Sovereignty.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Exactly. And so, all these things were going through my mind. And then I was like, okay, but what did I do anything to try to change the game? And I can say yes because I was involved in diversity, equity, inclusion, learning, development. I was involved in all of those things that were 100% focused on transformation in individuals in a corporate environment, right? And then finally, the leave the game part, that's kind of the space that I'm in now. When I think about our new theme as an example for next year, this whole idea of reimagining we, right? But reimagining we begins with reimagining me. So we're going to have some conversation about that. So we're going to take a break and then we're going to come back and I'm going to allow Gail to finish out what she was saying. And then we'll shift the conversation a bit and talk about our upcoming theme for 2026. So welcome back to Inflection Point Podcast and our discussion of our year in review. We've been having a really great conversations about what were those episodes over the course of the past year that really inspired us. And I want to say one thing, and then I want to pass the baton back to Gail so that she can finish out her portion. During the break, we were talking about that whole play the game, leave the game, play the game, change the game, and leave the game. And one of the women that was our guest is Lakeisha Wolf. As I mentioned earlier, she's the executive director of the Ujamaa Collective. And whenever we're in our sisterhood meetings, sometimes, right, and we'll be engaged in these conversations, and she breaks it down very succinctly. So, here's all this stuff that's up here, all the dynamics of all the confusion and all of this stuff that's going down up there, but we're down here. And down here
Grassroots.
is the space of sovereignty,
Mm.
cooperation, empowerment, engagement. So I always love when she does that, and it makes me feel good to say that I'm not up there. I'm down here by
Yeah,
choice.
grounded.
I'm down here. So Gail, I'm going to pass the baton
Yeah.
back to you so you can finish out your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I just want to comment that, and you're grounded when you're down here, right?
Mm.
You are
Mhm.
grounded in that truth.
Mm.
Yeah. And you come from that every moment. Yeah. You live from that. So the other one I chose was when we had Coach Ed Bradley on. And he was on twice, but I'm going to talk about the time that he was talking about education and the standardized testing that all states do, and things I didn't even know about. So that I've always felt and believed that those tests are very biased, and I couldn't imagine why they haven't been changed by now. And what he participated in, a group of people in Mississippi did, was they did change it, and to incredible degree. They let me tell you a little bit about Ed first. That he actually is as a coach, and he had been a teacher, I think, and a coach, high school athletic coach.
Mhm.
And then he kind of made a transition in his life, and he and his wife are they own the Powerful Minds Counseling, and so she's a PhD counselor, psychologist, and he does the coaching. So he's a life and transitional coach. He's had 25 years or more of experience, and he works with people for transitional issues, career, relationship, and he does business coaching. I think he had been in corporate also, that he was doing some
I think so
corporate
too. Yeah.
coaching also. So his approach combines very practical strategies with empathic listening and helping clients overcome their challenges and clarifying their vision and achieving their goals. And he's very passionate about supporting individuals. And he was doing that work even as a teacher and as a high school coach for the athletic team. That he always helped each one, if they were needing it, to really look inside themselves and to figure out what's going on in order to make changes. So he fit right into that path that he was building without even realizing it. Because he's very dedicated to really unlocking that full potential and guiding people towards fulfilling those goals. But Mississippi was once ranked not just near the bottom of the United States education standings, they were 49th out of 50 states. That's how far down they were in that bottom list. And I think it was in 2013, they implemented a multifaceted strategy for enhancing kindergarten to third grade literacy. And the Literacy-Based Promotion Act focused on early literacy and teacher development, included teacher training and proven reading instructions, methods, and teacher coaching. And they really believed in transparency, and they were really looking at what's going on at the grassroots level with these kids that are coming into the educational system. How are we feeling them, and how can we help them succeed? They relied on federally supported research and from the Institute of Education Science, and the state invested in phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. The law provided K through 3 teachers with training and support to help students master reading by the end of 3rd grade. So what they did was they also used what is called the NAEP, or the National Assessment of Educational Progress. Now, every state, I don't know if people realize that every state can choose how they want to do this for their students. But they have federal guidelines that they have to follow, and then each individual state can choose how they want to do the testing and create it, which means that it's really open for bias, and it's open for a variety of different things that doing empirical research would not exactly go through very well, because everything is not consistent. There's no consistency. So one student can test great in one state, but if they tested in another, they might do poorly. And what they found was that when they tested these kids that were doing well using the NAEP assessment, they found that they weren't doing that well. And so they wanted to look at what this assessment was really getting towards, and how could they then start training the teachers and so forth, and help these students learn. And so their Mississippi's reform led to significant gains in reading and math, with 4th graders improving on national assessments. They felt that that was really important, and they believe that early reading is a foundational skill that helps develop the ability to read at grade level by the end of 3rd grade. That also leads to general success academically for graduating from high school and preparing for colleges. So they really made a significant change, and within several years, they now are in the top 20 of high scores, I think nationwide. And so that's a significant change from 49 into that top 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I know he was part of that committee.
Mhm.
But it's but the NAEP doesn't just measure students, it measures the inequities of the systems surrounding them. And the transformation happens when communities reclaim their narrative and redefine what success looks like, and then demand the accountability from the ground up, which is training the teachers how to do this, and in a different way. And so I really found that was extremely interesting. I mean, the NAEP is their quote, they name it, they reference it as a nation's report card, as I said before, because every state could use that as a testing ground, and they may not come up with the same scores that they do with just the ones that they've come up with themselves. So they don't have a yardstick to measure everything, but they still would try to compare everything. What this also did is talked about was how this really highlights the inequity that is in the standardized testing, and how biased they are, and how unfair this is to so many students that are having to take these tests. I forget what grades they have. There's so many grades they have to take them throughout their from grade school on up. So one school district may serve primarily Black and brown students, and they may believe that they're hitting those targets, but they may not when they're taking it against another test in another state, or against the NAEP also. So what this did was it really started highlighting what the NAEP is going for, which is you have to create these tests that is going to help and support these students in training them and being able to help educate them, not just so they can pass a test, but because they're getting the round education that they need, and that it's being geared towards who they are, where they live, what socioeconomic area they're living in their lives, and what are they needing or lacking that they can use in gaining in that education. So it's kind of like opening the doors to pretty clearly show every state that they need to make some changes. And if Mississippi could come from that place at 49 up into the top 20, I think, and they also, the other piece was that they did it without the economic background or backing, because these were not wealthy school districts. Most of them were poor school districts, and they still were able to achieve that. I mean, I think that was incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, that's
Yeah.
very, very cool.
Right.
just this,
Because one thing to know and to feel and believe that there's bias,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
another thing
yeah.
to see it, right?
To
It's black
see
and
it,
white.
absolutely. And then there's a third thing,
Right.
to make a choice to do something about it,
That's right.
rather than just letting the
Exactly.
dust settle and just say, okay, this is
Right.
what you have, this is what's there.
Right.
Whenever I think about education,
Mhm.
one of the things that's very, very exciting to me as I think about the educational things that I did with my own kids growing up,
Mhm.
and we did a homeschool program for like 3 or 4 years or so. We did a homeschool program. And when I look at my daughter, Olivia, and even Hillary, the way they're approaching educating their boys, my grandson Zane is now 18 years old, and all of that, and just looking at where he is in his educational journey, and then looking at where Cairo is as a soon to be 6-year-old and
Yeah.
his educational journey. And it makes me feel really good that I set a foundation for them, so that there's certain things that they're able to now do with their own kids to ensure that those educational needs are going to be met. Because the bottom line is, I say this all the time, when God spoke, remember I said this when we were talking this
Yes.
morning, when God spoke and said, let there be light, he was also saying, let there be life.
Mhm.
And in saying, let there be life, he was saying, let there be Mavis, let there be Anita, let there be Gail, let there be Zane, let there be Cairo.
Right.
Like all of it,
Mhm.
all of it
That's
was
right.
a part of where we were intended
Right.
to be. And so the idea, for me, the idea of disrespecting somebody else's identity, like, who am I to do that?
Mhm.
Who am I to do
Because
that?
we
I
were
didn't have
made
anything to
unique.
do. I'm sorry, go ahead.
We were made unique.
That's right.
That's the point,
Yeah.
exactly.
hmm
We have
And
similarities and we have unique characteristics that are very different from everyone.
We're
exactly.
all empowered for a purpose.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. So that is a nice little segue into our theme for 2026. It's reimagine we,
Right.
begins with reimagine me. And I like that because I feel like it represents this three-way interaction, or this three-way intersection of personal empowerment, community engagement, and cooperative economics, right? And that's kind of the space that I am moving in right now. And I think that all three of those are essential for transforming individuals, first of all, from passive participants in an economic system that is based on capitalism. You remember the one episode where we talked about the comedian, and we were talking about this whole idea of us being just created to be consumers, and all of that.
Josh
Josh
Johnson.
Johnson,
Right.
Yeah.
absolutely. That's not, we're not just consumers, we are citizens.
We're citizens.
Which
Right.
means we need to be engaged in what is the fullness of work and activity and action that is going into building, rebuilding, re-strategizing in this country.
Because
Right?
the time is now.
It is now.
Absolutely.
Given the earth that is shaking underneath us, the time is now to really decide who we want to be and take action for that. And Anita, when you were explaining things are happening up here, but we're down here, I think you were alluding to the whole idea of the grassroots networks of efforts going on for this change, that we do not have to be a governor. We can be if we want, but we can affect change at this level. And everyone as a citizen should participate in using whatever gifts they have.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
But transformation has to happen at the individual level, but also at the community level, in order to redefine that narrative and really what success is, and to really start demanding accountability from the ground up. We have to do it from the ground up.
Absolutely. Which brings us into the reimagine me part,
Right.
right? And the reimagine me part is that personal empowerment is what prepares us as individuals to engage meaningfully in cooperative economic structures, while cooperative economics provides the platform to sustain and multiply the empowerment in those community-centered democratic ways, right? And so one without the other is limitation. But when you put the two together, the reimagine we with the reimagine me, we create a powerful engine for social, economic, and cultural transformation. And isn't that what we want and need right now?
Yes. We can't be passive. We can't really just ride along and then shake our fists in the air. We have to be active in whatever way a person can.
Yes.
Each person can.
Yes.
But the we imagine we has to come from the we imagine that me, right? There's work that I can do individually, and then there's work we can collectively do.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It's not an either or, it's both, it's an
It's
and.
both. Absolutely. And then that brings us to the connection between the two. It's a shift from individualism to collective agency. We're breaking that dependency, if you will, on extractive systems and moving more into a values-driven participation, education, skill development, sustainability, resilience, and all of those things, so that that shift to collective agency, it flows right back to what we were already talking about this year, the community engagement piece,
The collective
right?
Right.
And the grassroots movement. The grassroots movement is collective agency,
Right.
right?
Right. You know, I just wanted to make an additional comment about Ed Bradley and what he did really to reimagine his work and the work he saw that needed to be done. He saw kids who were really not college bound, did not want to go to college, and set up his programs and counseling to help them be exposed to different trades, different mentors, and help people find a path and not be pushed in the college track if that's not who they were to themselves.
Absolutely.
He helped them see that I am of who they were, what their interests were and what their skills and talents were, and he really supported and motivated them to seek that. It didn't have to be college.
Right. I would just love to see that in every school. Who are you? You know, as a approaching college senior, who do you see yourself as being in the world?
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be really.
And it kind of reminds me, it takes me back to the work of Paulo Freire and the pedagogy of the oppressed. I always go back to that. That's like the foundation of how I see education and all of that. So the idea, and I always get this image of somebody lifting like the lid off your head, and then they're pouring this information that they want you to have into your head with no critical thinking,
memorize,
no analysis, it's memorization and all of that. It's the critical thinking part really that makes us human beings.
That's challenging that, right? Yeah. Being curious about being challenging and inquisitive. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we have about 5 more minutes left. And what I'd like to say to our audience is we're going into 2026. So we've never done this quite before, but what I'd like to do is put out our call to action for guests for 2026. So we've already shared that this is what our focus is, this idea of reimagine we begins with reimagine me. Right. And so what I'm doing is kind of putting the call out there that if in fact you see alignment with yourself, the work that you do, the community that you're in, who you're serving, we'd like to hear from you. We would like to hear from you.
especially if
Yes.
you're a listener and you're growing with us.
Yeah.
You know, it would be a fascinating conversation.
Absolutely. So I'm kind of putting it out there. If you are listening and we sparked something in you, I would love to hear from you. You can send me an email. My email address is Anita Russell at theplacetosoar.com. Right. And then if we get something, have a conversation, you might end up being one of the people on our guest. But just kind of think about everything that we've been talking about when you heard the guests that we've had on and all of the things that we've been talking about, this engagement and this grassroots movement and all of that. If you feel empowered by any of that, please reach out to me, Anita Russell at theplacetosoar.com. We would love to hear from you. Final thoughts, Mavis and Gail, you got like 1 minute.
I just think it was so much fun to recollect the inspiration, or at least a couple of top ones from the year. That was really, really fun for me to do, because like we were saying, we move from one episode to the next and tend to download for the upcoming episode.
Right.
And we forget. So that was a fun exercise.
That was good. Yeah. And I wish everybody a happy holiday. And hopefully you can
Yes.
remember what
Happy
this holiday is all
holiday.
about, and find the joy and love and moments that you can all hold on to. Yeah. Open your heart.
Amen.
Amen. Yes. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So I just want to close us out with this thought. Empowerment and economics are often treated as separate domains. One seen as personal development, the other as community or policy work. Yet history, and lived experiences show that true empowerment cannot be sustained without economic agency. Likewise, cooperative economic systems depend on personally empowered individuals who are ready to engage, lead, lead, and invest in collective well-being. The deep connection.
You want me to finish reading it for you?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Here we go. The deep connection between personal empowerment and cooperative economics shows that they are not separate pursuits, but two parts of the same transformational journey. We invite you to continue with us as we delve into our 2026 theme, which we've already talked about a little bit. Reimagine We begins with Reimagine Me.
Thank you so much for that. That's how we flow, right?
That's how we flow.
That's how we flow. So
We're
to
here
our
for each other.
audience, we are here every first and third Wednesday of the month on Transformation Talk Radio and the Transformation Network. And we invite you to come and join us. And like I said, if you're interested in looking at the possibility of being a guest, just reach out. Anita Russell at theplacetosoar.com, and we will see you in January. Thank you for listening to Inflection Point Podcast, where our mantra is cultivating change from the inside out. The journey towards anti-racism and social change doesn't stop here. Truth, reconciliation, and healing come from ongoing, open, honest, and deliberate conversations. Continue to dive in and deconstruct your thoughts, ideas, and beliefs as we band together to manifest social change. Tune in to Inflection Point Podcast every first and third Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, here on TransformationTalkRadio.com for more conversations about how we can cultivate change from the inside out.